Today you'll be learning about the fourth commandment as published in the book of the law. The book of the law, not the so-called Bible, but the book of the law. And this is the book of the law that we're talking about. And like we do with the other commandments, I will remind everybody that these commandments were given by the voice of Tatanzambi in Mount Sinai to Moses and to all Isolele. For though Moses and the elders of Isolele only went into the mountain, and Moses alone received the tablets of the law, yet all Isolele heard the voice of the Most High. These commandments were written on 2 tables of stone by the very finger of the Most High. Moses broke these tables, as we know, after which he prepared 2 others on which Tatanzambi wrote the same words. And the tables were placed in the Ark of the Covenant, and then they were kept within the tabernacle, and the tabernacle is in the temple, or was in the temple until the Babylonish captivity. So that's the background. So as we discuss today's commandment, the fourth commandment, think of it like you're hearing it from the voice of the Most High, and you're right there on Mount Sinai. That's the context of this fourth commandment, just like the others. So what is this fourth commandment according to this book of the law? This is the fourth commandment. Let's listen in.
Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Thou shalt not revile him, nor speak evil of him, nor curse him. Thou shalt do no injustice unto him, and thou shalt maintain his right against his enemy. Thou shalt not exact rigorously of him, nor turn aside from relieving him. Thou shalt deliver him from the snare and the pit, and shalt return his ox when he strayeth. Thou shalt comfort him when he mourns, and nurture him when he sickens. Thou shalt not abate the price of what thou buyest of him, for his necessity, nor shalt thou exact of him, because he leaneth upon thee. For in so doing thousands shall rise up and call thee blessed, and the Lord thy God shall strengthen thee in all the work of thy hand.
So that is the fourth commandment. I like to observe before I start making interpretations. And the first thing that I observed that was repeated the most is the neighbor. The neighbor that we're being told to love. The neighbor is referred to as him or his or he. Of course, it's gender neutral, so this refers to she or he or him or her. And it is repeated 19 times in this commandment. 19 times. So clearly, this commandment is about the neighbor, and this commandment is also about you. You individually, you as a community, you as a nation, you because it's Isolele, the nation that was being spoken to by the Most High on Mount Sinai. 17 times the Most High is talking about you. And he's talking about you and your neighbor. 19 times your neighbor. So it's telling you how you're to behave towards your neighbor. This is about you and your neighbor. And what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to love your neighbor, just as you love yourself. And these are the words that are repeated 20 times when the Most High is explaining how to love or how not to love. Basically, how to behave in order to know that you're loving your neighbor. So this includes the do's and don'ts. I'll go one by one with the words that I've highlighted. I won't cover the word love. I know you guys got well done with the word love in Christianity, so you know what it means. But it's broken out. He says, you shall not revile him. Reviling somebody is verbally abusing somebody, criticizing somebody in an abusive or angry, insulting manner. Oops, somebody needs to mute. Let's see. All right. Thank you. So do not revile or do not verbally abuse or criticize somebody, your neighbor, in an abusive or angry, insulting manner. You know, before I even move on, one thing that became very clear as I was preparing this lesson was that the people of Isolele, the 2 million or so people of Isolele, did not necessarily know each other. They knew they were descendants of Jacob. They knew they were all under the yoke of Egypt as slaves. But now when they were being released, now that they had been set free by the Most High, when they were at Mount Horeb, this was just 3 months after they had left Egypt. So they really didn't have an identity per se that they could say we have this or that in common other than their bloodline. Because we're not told that they used to worship as a people, but these commandments now are helping them shape an identity. And they're being told, the guy next to you, consider that your neighbor. Even as we're on this journey to the promised land, every time you camp here or we camp there, and even when we get to the promised land, live in this manner with your neighbor. Do not verbally abuse them. Do not speak to them insultingly. Do not speak evil. The best way I could paraphrase that in today's language is don't be a hater. You know, speak uplifting words to one another. We've both come from enslavement in Egypt. What good does it do to hate on somebody in speech? Then they were told, do not curse somebody. A curse is a prayer or invocation of a higher being or a higher power to cause harm or injury upon your neighbor. So do not do that. Neither should you do injustice. What is injustice? Injustice is doing what is not just. It's being unfair. You know, that's injustice. We're told to maintain our neighbor's right. You know, we all know when we grew up in school, we were told, you know, don't let people bully you. So if you saw somebody bullying another one, you would step in and, you know, relieve the one who's been bullied. Now, the same applies today, whether you're an individual or a nation. You shouldn't be bullying another because you think you're bigger or more muscular or more powerful militarily. Somebody strikes you with a slap, you don't come with a nuclear weapon. You know, this is maintaining his right against his enemy. You shall not exact rigorously of him. Wow. This one really got me thinking. You know, in many African nations, the colonial masters, you know, the French, the British, Portuguese, and so on and so forth, many of them, when those nations got independence, they exacted some form of payment for many years. Some of them are still collecting those payments. And they said, this is payment for all the infrastructure we came and built on your land. Why were they exacting rigorously for stuff they did that we did not ask them to do? Why are they still exacting that way? At an individual level, you know, if somebody comes and needs assistance, needs a loan, why do you exact interest that is just going to make them slave? Why exact enormous amounts of interest in order to give us a mortgage? This is what the Isolele people are being told not to do to their neighbors, not to do to one another. If you want to know what you shouldn't do, just look at what the Egyptians did and continue to do to Isolele today. Then it talks about do not turn aside from relieving him. You know, we all know the story about the Good Samaritan that Isaiah gave. You see somebody under duress, but you choose to just pass by. Now, you're supposed to turn aside and help them. Help them. Now, it's not always that you'll be able to, but as much as you're able to, if it is within your power, relieve the one that needs to be relieved from the duress that they're in. You shall deliver him from the snare and the pit. What is a snare and what is a pit? A snare is man-made. A pit could be natural. So deliver your neighbor from all dangers, man-made or natural. You see your friend, you don't think they're doing the wise thing, taking that loan to buy things they don't need with money they don't have, to please people they don't know. Talk to them. Tell them they shouldn't do it. You're delivering them from the snare. That's a snare. That's a man-made snare. That's a man-made danger. If you see somebody heading down the pit or going down the cliff and they don't know it, let them know. You're loving them. That's an example of delivering them from the pit. And then it talks about, this one was really funny. You shall return his ox when he strays. So lost and found property. How many times have you come across something that's lost? What did you do with it? These guys were coming from Egypt. I mean, they left, they plundered whatever they plundered. They were told, the Egyptians were told to give them the gold and other things, and they left with that. They didn't know they're going to be in the wilderness. So at some point, it didn't really matter that they had gold or whatever they had, because they were still in the wilderness. But they were being told, if you find somebody's animal has come your way, you need to return it to them or take it to the elders and they'll figure out whose animal this is. How many, well, we don't have maybe cows and animals today in the urban cities, but we do come across other people's property. Do we return it? We should, obviously. What about this issue about the animal straying? You know, in many African cultures, we raise kids as a village. And when my child is out there playing in the neighborhood or in the next neighborhood, any other adult is pretty much their parent. And, you know, unlike, for example, here in the US, you know, we don't even feel at ease to let our kids go play in the neighborhood without an adult supervising them, because people don't take care of other people's children or property the same way like we used to, or like we do in Africa. So it is a communal way of living where you see that person or that child as your child. This is what Isolele was being told. This is how you need to live going forward so that you develop this sense of community. Thou shalt comfort him when he mourns. When we lose loved ones, when our friends lose loved ones, go there, be there. Let them be the one to hear them out. Find out what they're feeling. Find out what they're thinking. What questions they have for the Most High. Grieve with them. Grieve with them. The load is easier when it's shared, as we all lose friends and family. And slowly, we know the story. Many of them who left Egypt didn't make it. It was only, I think, those who were over 20 by the time they were departing Egypt. So in this journey, we will lose some. Let's remember to comfort each other. And then when some of us are sick, we nurture them. Just like you take care of a loved one when they're sick, nurturing is you keep feeding them, you give them medication, you take care of them. They do the same to you. You shall not abate the price of what you buy from him or of him. What does abating mean? It's decreasing the price. It's negotiating the price down or demanding that the price be lowered. Just because maybe you feel this individual has a lot of these items that they're producing, yours is not to push the price so low that it becomes an unjust price. I couldn't help but think of an example, a national example. We know the country where the price of uranium in the global market is $200, but this country was only paying 80 cents until they got kicked out. That is abating the price. It's decreasing the price of what they were buying from that African country. They did that for many years, almost 30, 40 years. Also, note that it says you buy from him. Buy from your neighbors. Buy from your own. Keep the money flowing within your community. Lift up your community. Clearly, some communities don't have our best interests at heart. Many of you know the stories about here in the US, the whole cosmetic business amongst the African American community is controlled by people of another culture from the other side of the world, and yet majority of the dollars are coming from the African American community. And when our brothers and sisters try and set up some of these businesses to provide those goods, they face very, very stiff competition, But the point here is we're encouraged to buy from one another so that we grow as a community, so that we develop as a community. You shall not exact of him. Oh, my goodness. Here in America, we have those payday lenders. You're going to get paid on the 15th. They tell you they can advance you, your paycheck on the 1st or before the 15th, but they want some exorbitant amount of interest on it. So maybe you end up giving up 20% or something like that. We're not supposed to do that. If that person needs the money in advance, lend it at a reasonable interest, not at an exorbitant interest. And it could be something else. Some people may not necessarily be dealing with money. It might be an exchange of goods. Be fair. That's the point. Just because somebody is depending on you, leaning on you, because you're the one with that good or service that they have, doesn't mean that, you steal from them. What happens when we do all these things that the Most High was saying we should do? For in so doing, thousands shall rise up and call you blessed. And the Most High, your Nzambi, it's not the Nzambi of the other religions. It's not the Nzambi of the other people. It's your Nzambi, the one who came down Mount Sinai, will strengthen you in all the work of your hand. So it's a cause and effect. You do these things, love your neighbor, and expect the Most High to increase your skill, to increase give you promotions in what you do, give you more business, give you the upper hand with your competitors. Expect him to strengthen you in that way. He will, and he does. That is how the Most High was telling us to love one another. Now, let's look at, in summary, that's what this commandment is about. You loving your neighbor, just like yourself. It's pretty straightforward. And for those who are seeing this commandment for the first time, at least in its totality, in the scriptures, the so-called Bible, in Deuteronomy, you will not find this commandment in its full form, like we've just seen it. This is Deuteronomy 5, where you have the commandments, and you'll not find it in here. Moses called Israel, made a covenant, talked face to face, stood between the Lord. You shall have no other gods, not make images, not bow down to them, showing mercies. Don't take the name of the Lord in vain. Keep the Sabbath day. Remember, you are a servant. Honor your father and mother. Don't kill. Don't commit adultery. Don't steal. Don't bear false witness. Don't covet your neighbor's house, and so on. You're not going to find it here. Why? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I'd like to know what you guys think, why it's not here. The other part in the scriptures is in the book of Exodus. This is Exodus chapter 20. Again, unfortunately, you will not find the commandment here, this commandment. And the Most High spoke these words. I am your Nzambi who brought you out of Egypt. Shall have no other gods before me. Don't make images. Don't bow down to them. I'll show mercy to thousands. Keep my commandments. Don't take the name of the Lord in vain. Remember the Sabbath day. 6 days you labor, but on the seventh day, for in 6 days, honor thy father and mother. Don't kill. Don't commit adultery. Don't steal. Don't bear false witness. Don't covet your neighbor's stuff. I did not see that you should love your neighbor as you love yourself. However, so in the 2 chapters in Exodus and in Deuteronomy 5, it's not listed where the commandments are listed. However, somewhere in Leviticus, and I put the other verses here so that you can see the context, they're not talking about the commandments, but this is where they mention it in Leviticus 19:18. You shall not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of your people, but you shall love the neighbor as yourself. Okay? Why was it not put in the list of the commandments? We will discuss that soon. Now, that was the Old Testament, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Exodus. What about in the New Testament? This is where it gets interesting. So you'll find this episode. This is the episode where a lawyer of the scriptures asked Isaiah question, tempting him and saying, Master, which is the great commandment in the law? Isaiah said unto him, Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind. And he said, this is a first and great commandment. We talked about this 3 weeks ago. But the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these 2 commandments hung all the law and the prophets. So Isaiah or Yesu is quoting this commandment and calling it the second and saying all the commandments hang on these 2 commandments. Yet this commandment, as we just saw, is not listed in the so-called Bible under the other commandments, where the other commandments are listed. Clearly, Isaiah was quoting from the book of the law, that was captured in the events at Mount Sinai or Mount Horeb. But those who compiled the so-called Bible thought it wise or thought it fit for their purpose not to include the book of the law and not to include this commandment. And yet Isaiah thinks it's one of the two greatest commandments. Absolutely, absolutely astounding. But now we know. And the book of Deuteronomy says that these things which are revealed are for us and our children and our children's children. So we thank him for showing us this commandment. All right, let's hear one more time on this commandment, and then we'll get into some discussion.
Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Thou shalt not revile him, nor speak evil of him, nor curse him. Thou shalt do no injustice unto him, and thou shalt maintain his right against his enemy. Thou shalt not exact rigorously of him, nor turn aside from relieving him. Thou shalt deliver him from the snare and the pit, and shalt return his ox when he strayeth. Thou shalt comfort him when he mourns, and nurture him when he sickens. Thou shalt not abate the price of what thou buyest of him, for his necessity, nor shalt thou exact of him, because he leaneth upon thee. For in so doing thousands shall rise up and call thee blessed, and the Lord thy God shall strengthen thee in all the work of thy hand.